welcome to Le Grande Bouffe.
The Big Feast.
With myself, Cole Smithey, and my co-host, Mike Lacy, and with our special co-host, Thelma Adams. Hello, Thelma.
Hi, Thelma.
Hey.
How you doing today, Thelma?
I am very excited because we're going to talk about Babyface, which is, we all talk about All About Eve as the movie about women trying to get ahead. Oh, she's, All About Eve. But people have not seen Babyface. And once you've seen Babyface...
You're so right. This is the... Barbara Stanwyck is the ultimate anti-heroine feminist icon.
I don't know. She's a social... It's just bare-fisted.
It really is.
I feel, the sadness of this movie. And the movie is about a woman from Erie, Pennsylvania, a young woman whose father has pimped her out in a speakeasy. And she's introduced, my God, 1933, to Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Hello.
It's a great time for people to be introduced to Nietzsche.
I think that Thelma bringing up Nietzsche is a perfect segue because Thelma is an author as well, and we haven't properly introduced our listeners to Thelma Adams. Thelma Adams.
I think she's a neo-Nietzschean from what I've...
A neo-Nietzschean? No, I love to write. That's what I can say. I am a writer.
And you've just completed your second novel, is that right?
The second published novel, The Last Woman Standing. Very much female-driven story.
Great. And how's the book doing?
Book is killing it. It is a Kindle bestseller, and it's #1 in historical biographical fiction. So it is really, for 2 months, it's been holding that spot.
The Last Woman Standing.
And it's about Wyatt Earp's wife, who? Wyatt Earp married a Jewish woman, and they met in Tombstone. We've seen all the movies. We know the story. But there are so many other characters that need to be examined, and my whole mission is to examine a lot of interesting women characters who have not been examined.
That's fantastic. And, of course, you have a few other gigs that you do as well.
One or two. I had a first novel that was published called Playdate that St. Martin's published, and then I am writing a weekly culture column for the New York Observer, which is completely fun because I can write about everything. I can write about how Ab Fab is the woman's comedy to watch, not Ghostbusters. I can write about how the hell could Owen Gleiberman say those things about Renee Zellweger's face.
Oh, yeah.
How very dare you.
Yeah, you really held I loved how you held his feet to the fire. That was great.
You know what?
Well done.
Cole, you hit a point where you realize these people are not helping me forward, and I am free.
Right?
I am free.
And that's
awesome.
That's a great editorial. This is great editorial shoes to stand in. So what are some of your upcoming plans for pieces?
Well, I just wrote last week. I wrote about multiple maniacs. I had interviewed at length John Waters, who I adore, who's one of my favorite all-time interviewees. And I wrote about multiple maniacs, which is currently at the IFC Center, and its relationship to Charles Manson and how it kind of came out of the same cultural clay.
Interesting.
And I
hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's completely contemporary. It came out in 1970. The Tate LaBianca murders were 1969.
Right.
And he kind of says, in terms of Leslie Van Houten, if she had been in Baltimore, she would have been in my movies.
Right.
But for that, she ended up with Charles Manson, and damn it, she is still in prison. Thank you, Jerry Brown Knott.
Wow. Wow.
Come on.
Yeah.
Jerry. You went out with Linda Ronstadt. You had a hip period.
So
Let her go.
Charlie Manson and John Waters at opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right.
Kind of like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump.
Very much. I know. And we are both, that's a very good illusion, and we are both Sandersites. So,
yes, we are. And Jill Steinites.
And, well, now in my case, I am crossing over, and I am going to vote for Hillary. I am not pro-Hillary. I am making that step.
Understood.
Which we all
Trump
have
all
to
the way.
respect. Trump, and you are Trump all the way.
Yeah.
You know what's
Representing
funny?
Brooklyn.
Representing Bill de Blasio. Representing, it's funny. I felt like I was not someone who watched reality TV that much. I did 1 semester, 1 year of Survivor, and I'm like, I get it. And so I never watched Trump on TV, and I'm a little bit pissed off because I want to change the channel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
can't.
I want to get him off.
Well, it's funny because
I don't want to get him off. I want to get him off the channel.
Right, yeah, no, of course. And
I was very confused by what you said, Thelma. Thank you for...
I started blocking out any post that would show up in my Facebook feed, any reference to Donald Trump, and it took forever to get it, weeded out to where I don't see it because I don't watch television. And I don't want to be exposed to it. And even listening to NPR, I find that they play into his hand so much because they just perpetrate all of this nonsense. And I think that if there were more editorial responsibility, that they would shun even the coverage that they give so much of his nonsense.
I agree. We're not going to change anything because what we've become is a click culture. Where even news is driven by clicks. And so Trump gets more clicks than Clinton, gets more clicks than Sanders.
Right.
It's like this odd thing. And I've been thinking lately, when you think back a couple of decades just to Bill Clinton and the whole thing of I smoked, but I didn't inhale.
Right,
okay. So it was like, okay, he smoked, but he didn't inhale. All right. Okay, so we can kind of let that go. Like our moral threshold has gotten so low that then, now we're at a point where my wife posed naked.
As most likely as an illegal immigrant when you're running on an anti-immigrant platform.
And we almost, Hillary, we're like in this moral morass.
We are, and I think the technology has done a lot to bring that about. The cell phones and computers. I just saw Werner Herzog's documentary, Lo and Behold, Reveries of the connected world. Yeah.
Can people just do a title that's like Bandstand?
I agree with you.
Not when those people are Werner Herzog.
I love the ones that are like there's 30 words in the title. I love making fun of them.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like an academic tome. You can have blah 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 colon the relationship of gender and but no. Okay.
All right, so we have one point of order.
Let's do our point of order. Okay.
Which is that we are drinking the Maui Brewing Company Big Swell IPA. And it has tropical citrus hops that burst from this dry hop IPA. It's a 6.8 ABV, so it's got a little kick to it.
You can trust a beer when they put the longitude and latitude of where it's brewed right on the can.
It's a beautiful can. I had it sitting in the kitchen because I was saving it for you guys. I didn't want to put it in the fridge, or I would have drank it. So I had it sitting out hot. But I've met Garrett Marrero, the founder and big honcho, and he's a really nice guy. And his beer is great. I really find this beer to be especially delicious on this hot day.
If he was not a nice guy, would you still like his beer? Yes.
I don't know, but I tell you, when I saw the beer on the shelf, I went right for it because I know him.
Okay. Okay. And it's sweltering. Today is the definition of sweltering.
It is.
Yeah,
it's a perfect day.
Yeah, we're suffering the dog days of New York summer.
Okay.
Which brings us to this magnificent film that we were fortunate to have Thelma bring up, because I'd never seen it. I don't think Mike had ever seen it.
No.
And it's called Babyface. Thelma?
We've heard it. Do you want to sing?
No, we didn't get that. I don't think
we
need
did.
it.
I don't know.
Maybe just one for safety, Cole?
Okay, come on. Just give us
baby face. You got the cutest little baby face.
Oh, I remember the song which I remember is Jeepers Creepers. Where'd you get those peepers?
That's right. That's
what you're really singing.
That's what I'm riffing off of. Yeah.
All right. Well,
now that we're done with that.
Now that we're done with that, oh my God. It's a fantastic pre-code movie starring Barbara Stanwyck, and I know that in my own career, when I've talked about women who, because I'm so sister solidarity, but every once in a while you get this woman who tries to like ride your coattails and then push you off the train. And we all say, all about Eve. Mm-hmm. But here's the case of a movie called Babyface about a young woman from Erie, Pennsylvania, and it really looks like Erie, Pennsylvania. It is very industrial. She is working at a speakeasy run by her father, who's been pimping her out.
It seems like it's their apartment. Like he's turned their house into a speakeasy.
Yes. Yeah, it's an apartment.
It's an apartment. So he really is pimping out his own daughter in this Prohibition era speakeasy.
And there's an illusion that she makes of him being like worse than all of them. So
isn't it worse? The point is, it's one thing to pimp out someone for money, and it's another when you're pimping out your own daughter.
But there's so many great scenes of Lily, Barbara Stanwyck's character, speaking truth to the patriarchy. And I love the scene that happens between her and her dad when she tells him off right in the beginning because he wants to fire the black maid Chico, who is amazing, played by Teresa Harris.
Right, and the interesting thing about Chico, it's an odd name, Chico, but she's a very naturalistic character, unlike, say, the mammy in Tara in
Gone with the Wind.
Here we have a black woman character who really is the kind of the best friend / maid of our leading character, and she's very naturalistic, and she does sing. She was a music student, and one of the things, this is pre-code, one of the things about once the code came in, there weren't those kind of roles for women, that Teresa could not get a role that was naturalistic, and you really feel this connection between her and Barbara Stanwyck and their characters that's very much like they accept, there's a sister solidarity to it. It's that you're black, I'm white, but we're both women and we're both being exploited.
That's right.
And the whole theme is really, okay, who's exploiting who? The point that Nietzsche makes, or that, that we learn, is that what do you want to do? Do you want someone to pimp you out? Do you want to be exploited? Or do you want to acknowledge that you have power in your own body? And Barbara Stanwyck, gorgeous, blonde, sexy, nubile, uses her own power
to become the master.
To become the master. Are you a slave or are you a master?
And something about her relationship with her maid demonstrates that she is a good person on some level. I feel like it's a character that you'd think maybe shows up in like a second draft where like this woman seems like totally out for herself.
What I found was that the songs that she is singing, and she has a beautiful voice. Teresa Harris is a beautiful singer, and she's singing these blues.
She's singing St. Louis blues is one of them. Yeah.
And the lyrics are in the subtext of the content, because this movie is a very complexly layered. It's really a satirical exploitation movie to begin with. What I found really shocking was that Daryl F. Zanuck wrote the story.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me.
Right. Well, I think what it speaks to is that we have a warped sense of time. We see time as something that progresses. And what really has happened in our current time is that the relationship between men and women on screen has regressed. And so it's shocking to see how progressive this is, how free Barbara Stanwyck is in her own body.
Well, yeah, and her transition, because it's quite a transition that she makes from the bottom of the bottom to the highest of the high, and the costume designer is just, I'm having a field day. And Barbara Streisand.
Streisand or Stanwyck?
I'm sorry, Stanwyck. See, the beer's already kicking in. No, Barbara Stanwyck can work a costume like nobody else. Everything that she wears it with such meticulous attention to her behavior. It's really something.
I've got to say, I enjoyed watching her. There's a moment where she's wearing one of these fabulous costumes, and you can figure out who designed them, but she's wearing some, either satin or silky velvet dress, and she goes to answer the door of this swanky apartment because she's risen and risen and risen and now has a sugar daddy who allows for it. But the way she goes to the door is not like, oh, I'm cute and I'm wearing this dress and oh, please like me. It's, oh my God, I have to tolerate this person. I'm the one in the dress with the power.
Absolutely, and she turns. She's so flexible. I do want to talk a little bit about where she gets her indoctrination is from the cobbler.
It's an interesting character, and I'm curious about the cobbler, if he was like one of these great German actors who then crossed the pond.
I think he's German, but then there's something in his accent that sounds like he could be from the Netherlands or something. I'm not completely convinced that he's German, but he does have that Germanic bearing, and certainly the way he praises Nietzsche is, he thinks he's the greatest philosopher of all time.
And that got cut out. I mean, we're talking about a pre-code film, so we can see it. And you can see it in its pre-code splendor. But for decades, no one knew that it was Nietzsche. They took out that book cover and they did the voiceover over the cobbler's shoulders so he moralized to Lily as opposed to just giving her these Nietzsche quotes that are basically like, are you a slave or are you a master?
That's incredible. I didn't realize that there was a different cut of this film.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Yeah.
Like 4 minutes got cut out, I believe.
It's major. So there's all the stuff that's like, when you watch, and make sure you watch the pre-code or what they call the pre-release form.
Which is what we saw.
Which is,
right.
Yeah. There's a scene, she's in their apartment, and it's the speakeasy, and her father has sold her to a politician who comes. And what's Barbara Stanwyck is very slim. And you can see there's no major undergarment underneath. And this scungy politician goes to grope her, and he does literally grope her. Right. He gropes her breasts, and it's visible in the pre-code version. There's something, it's very earthy, and then she bonks him on the head with a bottle.
Yeah, it's a great response, and I have to say, she doesn't come completely unpredetermined to being to fighting back. She's a tough woman, and she stands up for herself. She smashes a bottle on his head.
It takes her a bit. I mean, I do feel like there's a moment when she talks to the Nietzsche spewing cobbler where her father's just died. That is not a spoiler. And she's facing her future, and she's like, well, I can be a burlesque dancer. I'm just like, And the cobbler says, again, are you a master or a slave? Do you master your own destiny? Are you going to take the power that you have, which is your female form and your female power, and go to the big city, to New York, and rise to the top?
And you see in Barbara Stanwyck's response, you see the exact moment when the penny drops.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I love about her characterization in this film is that she shows you everything, but it's so subtle. You see the ideas, you see how she processes information, and that's a big part of this story because she really develops quickly and just leaves a trail of men in her wake. But you see every layer of that of her transition as that character come to life. There's no nothing where it feels like something's jumping. Everything is step by step.
Yeah, the comparing this to All About Eve is interesting because All About Eve is not actually about Eve. She's not the main character. Where this is the story of the woman who's climbing on the backs of others, and the morality of it is so fascinating because it's complete. I think it's absolutely endorses her behavior.
That's an interesting question. I think that that's a question to raise. Does it endorse her behavior, or does it raise the question of, do you want to be exploited or not? And if you have power because of your sexuality? Do you want it to constantly be taken, or do you want to use it to rise? And even at that point, if you make that decision, there's a cost.
There's
a pretty huge cost.
And there's a limit to where it can take you in terms of, if you go that Nietzschean route, intimacy with people, is you're kind of sacrificing that.
Also, I think, not only are you sacrificing that in order to move up, the metaphor is very bald. They go to this trust company, this bank in New York, and it's just like this skyscraper, and it just, it's obviously hierarchical. But the men that she sleeps with, and they don't pull any punches, are largely, you can give John Wayne a nod, but largely unattractive.
Well, that's true, and also they all carry that holier than thou persona with them, as one gets rid of the other because he caught them in the bathroom together, and of course he's no better than the guy who he caught in the bathroom. It's just that he's able to exploit that moment for himself,
right?
And he now gets the prize, which is of course Lily.
So to speak to broader context, and I just want to bring up one thing, I would love if we could talk about what the code means, because I'm sure some listeners aren't as familiar as us. But the second thing I'd love to get to is the fact that this is a trust company. This is 1933, and at some point, the last man that she winds up with is being indicted for presumably fraud. This being 3 years after the stock market falls. So there is the context that Zanuck, who wrote the story and who himself was a studio climber, these are nefarious people who are using people. But wherever you want to go, if you want to talk about the code, I think that would be
the Hays Code. You want to talk a little
right. Well,
about the Hays Code?
I'm not a historian in any way, shape, or form, but I mean, I actually am in terms of, I'm not a film historian in that shape. I've been watching pre-code movies for a long time. This one pushed an envelope. There was a series of movies, including Babyface, that were too explicit. And part of the interesting thing is they were too explicit because women were able to use their sexuality, because African Americans were able to express something beyond the limits of that maid character. And as in all things, and I love You Must Remember This, the podcast, there was probably some external force at that time that encouraged them to crack down and change. But what's interesting is that it had an impact for a really, really, really long time.
Well, and this was one of the Hays Code was started in 29, but it didn't really have any teeth until
right after this film. I think it's 34.
Right after this film, and I think July 1st, 34 was when the Hays Code. What happened?
Yeah, and this one came out July 1, 33.
So this movie was a lightning rod for the pro code people to say, "Oh, you've gone too far. Now we have to really get serious with this." And that was when.
And it does go a lot farther, right? I mean, it really goes. There's nothing left to suggestion. You really know, A, that Barbara Stanwyck's father is pimping her out, B, that her best friend is the black woman, black maid, Chico. There is a scene in which she brokers their passage on a freight train, clearly by giving sexual favors. Like, this stuff is not...
That's the first time she uses that power.
Yeah, it's not like we're watching a Deborah Granick Winter's Bone.
But that's what I love about it, is that the satire is so plainly laid out. And another way that they do
I'm sorry, is it even satire?
Well, it is satire, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. One of the giveaways to me is that it's a satire, and I love it. I love the way that you see the side of the building, and you see how she works her way up through these different layers of the investment firm, and so each essentially each floor that she starts out in filing, and then she moves on to accounting. She's really moving the corporate ladder,
she's
stair
literally
by
stair.
And so you really get that sense of the men that she's crushing under her as you do it. And to me, I mean, that is because it has, you're using this kind of symbolism. And so to me, it makes the satire that much more barbed, that it's very clear.
Can I ask a question I think is relevant to what she's doing? Is she good at her jobs?
She is good at her job.
Yeah, so I think that's what's fascinating is one thing she's doing is she's
capable.
She is capable. It'd be another thing if she was depicted as just a floozy who like worked her way up. But it's a very different
great point.
Right.
story than that.
And I don't even agree that she's crushing these men under her. I feel like she's opportunistic.
Yeah, she's taking advantage of them. Absolutely.
If this is a story about a man, I feel like this is what was said about the movie Nymphomaniac by Lars von Trier. Is if it was a story about a man, it would be completely uninteresting. Like what makes it an essentially interesting story is that we don't expect this from a woman. And I think there's a similar thing happening here, which says more about society than this character.
Well,
maybe.
because typically, pre-code, post-code, the woman who sleeps with her boss, or look at the apartment, or look at these things, in some ways she's a victim of the system. And the whole idea of Nietzsche here, whether you use it or not, is that the Barbara Stanwyck character, Lily, could have been a victim. She was a victim from the time she was 14 when her father was pimping her out. But she makes a choice that she is going to use this same set of skills to rise.
Absolutely. And it's important to note that this comes from the same era as the group theater and Clifford Odets, when people were writing this kind of stuff. And so you had real life characters, you had women who were, prostitutes as characters, because that's the reality. They were reflecting that. And then the Hays Code came along and said, we don't want any of that reality stuff.
Right.
We don't want that.
And even the men in this, there's a lot of reality. When she's in Erie, Pennsylvania, and they keep having these, she opens the window and there are these stock shots of industry, of factories and smoke, and she looks out. But the men that are in this speakeasy in her apartment, in her father's apartment, are like sweaty and shirtless, and it's not like it's Channing Tatum. Throughout it, it's like you see that the choice she had, how tough she had to be. And I think one of the things that we haven't talked about a little bit is just in her Nietzschean choice, in her desire to use this power, she gains material wealth and loses spiritual. She becomes out of touch. She doesn't have a chance to figure out who she is because she's always in the context of other people.
Well, and also, that brings us to her crisis decision and that denouement, and that's where the story wraps back on itself. And I feel like, I don't know if it was Zanuck or the screenwriters, one of whom was a woman. It was a man and woman team that wrote the screenplay. But I don't know if she has come around to this and a more right wing stance of looking at exploitation and saying that that's a socialist thing, and the sentiment is life with sentiment is going to hold more value for her. I know that's a troubling idea. Huh?
No, I would say, because you have to kind of say what I would say is, in many, many, many movies, and we can talk about current movies, we can talk about the movie I saw today, is the ending true to the whole movie? And this is a movie where the ending, you kind of have to, if you're going to discuss the movie, just toss the ending.
Yeah.
Because the ending is like this oddly.
I'm so glad you said that. That because that is a big key.
Turn it off if you don't want spoilers on this movie that came out in 1933.
Damn you!
But her final romance, who she actually it was George Brent. Is one.
Yes.
She actually realizes she has feelings for him. he commits suicide in one of those ways where you shoot yourself
in the stomach.
Like, huh?
And you and then you're in the you're in the ambo, and the medic is taking your pulse with your forehead.
Oh, that was so weird with the middle finger.
Yeah, because this is pre like Hippocrates or something. Like no one knows how like
Right. You know, the thing.
And she's got this big box of jewels and
she has
cash.
$500,000.
I love that box. I want that box, and it's like pigskin. She even says, and she shows it.
Yeah.
It's 1933, so you also have to realize it's
It's the Depression.
Well,
it's Depression, it's
$500,000.
Prohibition, and there's this whole. You really believe the squalor, and you really believe the wealth. It's kind of not like those movies that you see that's just like The Thin Man, where everybody's like, la 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 la.
That's so true. That's very true.
You really get a sense of the the awesome power of going from nothing to everything, and almost in like a House of Cards way, you're like wanting her to keep going and like climb the next ladder, and you become aware of how precarious it is.
It's like a sexual slasher film.
What? Okay, now I have to explain
She's
that.
just
Cole.
conquering. She's just conquering, you know?
But so what is
And there are people who are dying. I mean, she
people are killing themselves over her.
There are people who are killing themselves and others over her. But what's interesting always, when you watch it again and again, is no longer to watch who's killing who, but to watch Barbara Stanwyck's reactions.
Yes.
Which are just a thing of beauty. I know that we, recently Owen Gleiberman was talking when he disparaged Renee Zellweger, and I won't beat this like a dead horse, but he also said something about Barbara Stanwyck or even, Betty Davis not being beautiful. And it's like, no, she was stunning. She just actually had a real face.
Oh yeah. She's gorgeous, and there's not a second in this movie. I think the first person that she tries out her charms in the big city is the cop. There's no
straight up double take.
There's no question that she has womanly charms to be reckoned with. There's no question.
So how do we look at it in terms of something like All About Eve, which is like the successful woman, and then there's the young woman who weasels her way in?
Well, All About Eve is a lighter fare. This is much more connected to the dramaturgy of someone like Clifford Odets and the group theater of the 30s. This is social theater. If
what can you describe that to me?
Sure. If you think about the kind of plays that were coming out of Harold Clurman and and Clifford Odets and the kind of Waiting for Lefty, they were writing these plays that were meant to change the viewer. They were meant to make the audience think about things in a different way, and this movie comes from that same intentionality of social change. That's what I see, and I think that Zanuck, he had done The Jazz Singer in 27, Public Enemy in 31, I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang in 32, and then did this. And so if you look at that lineage of films that Zanuck was doing, he was pretty personally invested in making serious social statements, and that's what this movie is. And to me, the big difference between this quality of dramaturgy and the shite that we get from Hollywood is day and night.
Yeah, I mean, how does that happen? That's the funny thing. Well, it's that we don't really, who watches this? Babyface. Who watches, these 1933 movies? And then you watch them and you go and you watch, okay, let's say the female Ghostbusters. And you're told by the female critical establishment, oh, you have to support this movie because it's female, and yet it's nowhere near as sophisticated as Babyface, which is the story of a woman who has nothing, who's mentored to appreciate Nietzsche when she's not really a reader, and she crawls her way up to the top because she's not allowed in.
Can I give a counter reading of like the sex positive analysis of this.
Yeah.
So I listened yesterday to the newest You Must Remember This, and I gave a shout out to Karina Longworth, and she liked it on Twitter, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, go Karina. She is a national treasure.
She's amazing. And yesterday's was, she's doing a series now on Joan Crawford, and she's talking about Joan Crawford's early life, and when she came to the studios, the system was if you were a cute curly-haired blonde girl with legs, you were brought out on dates with executives, and you were used as a sexual entreaty to them in exchange for maybe getting some extra work, or who knows, you might be the next big star. And so it's this whole market economy of very consciously using the sex of women for everyone's advantage and supposedly them. So one way to look in this movie...
Hold on, let's pause. I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
For everyone's advantage? What does that mean? For
the studio executives to basically using them as escorts to like lure people over, using, like they talked about Joan Crawford.
So the starlets were pimped out. Is that what you're saying? Or no, you're more sophisticated.
That is what I'm saying. They were pimped out. Yeah, I was just being wordy. It seems like they were pimped out, but Joan Crawford, for example, seems like the rare exception where they still managed stardom and weren't just given, as Karina points out, like a lot of them given basically enough money for a bus ticket back to the Midwest. So for every Joan Crawford, or for every person like in this, there were tons of women who did not get success.
And
but
Barbara Stanwyck had success on Broadway, but she came with someone who was was he her husband or a partner who was more successful, but didn't have talking material.
Yeah.
So they came to Hollywood, and she was the one who had that special something on screen. And it's unusual to have it. Like if you see her on screen, and I would love to talk to the two of you about what is it about Barbara Stanwyck? What makes her a great actress?
She is a real actress. She really is somebody who knows how to create a character. I don't know if she studied Stanislavski, but she knows how to create a character, and that's something that it's so authentic, it's indisputable. When you see it, you know what that thing is. And in this film, everything that her character thinks and feels, you, as an audience member, you think and you feel.
I think I'll talk about like this character in particular, and what I think she pulls off really well is you understand how all these men who on some level must know that they're being operated on could still go along with this, because there's that sense of, well, maybe she is just suddenly falling in love with me and wants to...
How conscious do you think... Oh, that's another question. We can kind of sidebar that question, which is how conscious are they that they're being played? I'm kind of curious, just also, there's just sticking to the Barbara Stanwyck as actress, there's a scene when she's sitting with, is it George Brent?
At the end?
At the end, and they're out for the night, and he says, "What are you thinking about?"
Were they on the boat?
No, they're still in the nightclub before the boat, and she is clearly thinking things, but she's like, "Oh no, I'm not." Like she denies the fact that she has a full range of thought. And there isn't a time that you look at her where she's not. There's a lot of time in this movie because she's not a reader, she's not an intellectual, but there's a lot of time where she's just sitting there and she's obviously has an opinion about the situation.
Absolutely.
And you really feel that, whether she's sitting on the end of her bed in the crappy Erie, Pennsylvania house, whether she's sitting on her bunk in a fancy French cruise ship. There isn't a
Well, here's what I think. They asked Elvis Costello about singing because he never took any singing lessons, but he said that he had one bit of advice from a singing coach, and that is never look up at the note, always look down at the note. And I feel like Barbara Stanwyck in this film, no matter where she is and how powerful the people or the person or people are around her, she's always looking down at the note. She's always looking from her position. And so she's never, and you see this in the film with Chico, because Chico, when they first go into the office building, Chico's looking up. She's actually looking up kind of
Always,
at
yes.
the ceiling. But Barbara Stanwyck's character, Lily, is always looking down. And so you understand that she is in control. So every scene that she is in, she is always in control. And I love the the turnabout is fair play that she does when she gets caught in the bathroom with her boss.
Right.
Because she's thinking on her feet, and it's so effortless, and she does the fake little crying thing. But then as soon as she gets what she wants, she turns and she
There's
thanks
a lot
him.
of that,
She
yeah.
thanks him, and because now, and that's her way of actually establishing power over that person. Even though even the guy thinks that means that now she belongs to him. Well, yeah, she does belong to you, buddy, but there's a price.
Right.
She's incredibly intelligent. However way you want to judge her morally, but there is no misconception in this movie that maybe she's not an intellectual per se.
She's not intellectual. She definitely is not.
She's not intellectual, but
she's very intelligent.
She's very intelligent, and that's, I think, a very bold thing at this time. And then after this, for a long time, for women to be portrayed that way in a film.
Well, that about wraps things up for this week's edition of Le Grande Bouffe. I did want to mention the beer, the Big Swell. Big Swell. Boy, the Big Swell. It's amazing how 6.8 will just change the way you talk. Maui Brewing Company's Big Swell IPA. It sure is swell. And so is Thelma Adams. And Mike and I are so delighted to have had this time speaking with Thelma Adams on this just magnificent film, Babyface, that you have to hunt down. And
it's fantastic.
You cannot watch this movie only once. You have to watch it at least twice, at least.
And it doesn't hurt before you watch it to read what was cut, because it gives you insight into what's there.
Very good. Thank you all, as always, for listening. And remember to turn your cell phones off when you're walking, driving, or watching a movie.
Thank you.